Hello, everyone. My name is Casey, and I'm a therapy intern here at Community Partners. And on this video, we're going to talk about conversation and communication. First, we're going to start with looking at the different types of communication or the communication styles. We communicate in a number of different ways with one another. We do that through written forms of communication, drawing. We do that with our body language, our eye gestures, our hand movements, our body positioning. We do that also with using our voices and saying words. We use text messaging. So there's a number of different ways that we communicate with one another. In this video, we're going to focus on using verbal communication, and we're going to talk a little bit about the 4 different types of communication styles. And those 4 are passive aggressive, and assertive. Every person has a unique communication style in the way in which they interact and exchange information with other people. Some people kind of have a default communication style, the one in which they fall back towards and use the most often. We're going to talk about these 4 main styles, but I think what's really important before we start is to talk about the fact that there's kind of a purpose for every communication style. And a lot of these different communication styles have an appropriate context in which they could be used. So when we talk about aggressive communication, you can think of different ways and situations where it's appropriate to communicate aggressively. But what we really want to focus on is our overall and kind of what we are wanting to put out for a communication style, what we're looking to achieve with our relationships, what our needs are, how we want to get those met. So we're going to dive in a little bit deeper in the different types of communication. We're going to start by talking about passive communication. So people that use passive communication often act indifferently to others. They kind of can consider themselves as a doormat, allowing other people to kind of walk all over them or kind of control the situation. Folks that are passive usually fail to express what they are really feeling and their emotions. And they really kind of allow other people to express themselves rather than really expressing what they're feeling. So at the corner of each kind of slide, I've put in some examples of the different types of communication. So passive communication can kind of sound like, I don't know, whatever you think, you have more experience than I do, you decide. I'll go with whatever everybody else wants. It doesn't matter to me. So when we think about passive communication, typically people are passive for a set period of time. And then sometimes there's kind of that straw that breaks the camel's back and they kind of can explode. But passive communicators typically have low self-esteem, low self-worth. They don't feel like they're worthy enough to have an opinion. Maybe they're trying to please other people to make more friendships or to keep friends and not lose friends. They believe that if I do whatever you want me to do, you won't leave me, you'll stay my friend. Maybe there's some abandonment stuff that kind of comes in here. So this is a communication style that can be really harmful for the person that's communicating, but at times it can be really harmful for the relationship, the group of people, because it's not a very fair relationship. It's not a relationship that encourages a lot of growth, that fosters growth in communication. Our next communication style is called aggressive communication. Aggressive communication is emphasized by speaking loudly, being more demanding. We can see this physically by having a very demanding eye contact. We can see in the picture here, the person is kind of invading the other person's space. They're using their finger to aggressively point at them. You can kind of see by their facial expression that they're yelling, that they may be angry. People that use this type of communication can try to really kind of control other people, sometimes by using blaming, intimidating, criticizing, threatening, attacking, and there's other different kinds of examples beyond just those. But here we're really looking at the communicator only really focused on their own needs and not really the needs of the other person. They might say things like, I'm right and you're wrong, it's my way or the highway, everything's your fault, you never do anything right, I don't agree with you, so I don't have to listen to what you have to say. So this type of communication can be very, very harmful in relationships. This can be very damaging. This looks like kind of a one-sided conversation where somebody's being very aggressive, and perhaps they're using what's called you statements, where they're saying you did this and you did that and you did this. So a very one-sided form of communication, and like I said, can be pretty damaging to a relationship. Somebody that's aggressive in this way might have some type of control issue, might prefer, be more comfortable in dominating somebody else because they feel like they have direct control of the situation. And typically they're only really concerned about their own needs and nobody else's needs. Passive aggressive is our next form of communication. So passive aggressive really looks at a combination of passive communication and aggressive communication. So passive in that somebody's not really saying how or what they feel. And then aggressive in that typically they have some resentment and maybe can mutter something or have some type of revenge that comes out in a different way. So passive aggressive communicators appear passive on the surface, but they may feel powerless or stuck. There's some resentment happening there, which really leads to seething or acting out in subtle, indirect, or secretive ways. Most passive aggressive communicators will mutter to themselves rather than confront a person or a situation. So I put an example of that there. A person can say, sure, we can do things your way, and mutters, even though your way is stupid. That would be very passive aggressive. Another example would be, that's fine with me, but don't be surprised if someone else gets mad. So if you kind of think about the body language that's coming here, it's probably pretty condescending. Maybe somebody's kind of like shaking their head from side to side. Maybe there's some finger pointing. But we're looking at a lot of kind of manipulation here. There can also be some difficulty in acknowledging their own feelings, their own anger. This could be a situation where somebody's trying really hard to not express their anger and to be more passive, but the anger kind of bubbles over and boils out in some type of maybe sarcastic type of response, like, but don't be surprised if somebody else gets mad. We have some kind of cool passive aggressive street signs here. Fine, don't stop, whatever, would be a really another great kind of example of that. Passive aggressive communication is pretty damaging to relationships. The difference here with aggressive is aggressive communicators are expressing their needs and they're not necessarily doing it in a healthy way, but folks that are passive aggressive aren't really expressing their needs in a situation. They're kind of letting indirect messages boil out, but it's not kind of that clear-cut communication where they're saying they're upset about something. Our last communication style is called assertive communication. So assertive is this really nice balance of respecting both individuals rather than, only respecting yourself or respecting another person. We're respecting everybody here. Assertive communication is thought to be the most effective form of communication because we really focus on kind of having an open link of communication, not being too bearing, allowing a two-sided kind of conversation. Assertive communicators can express their own needs, feelings, desires, wants, wishes, thoughts, while also considering the needs of other people. So when we think about assertive communication, this can be a form of respect. This can be somebody saying, I realize that I feel this way. How do you feel about this? I respect your rights. We are equally entitled to our own kind of opinions, but we can kind of continue to respect each other, even though we see things differently. Assertive communicators often have really great boundaries. And while it's not always comfortable to share one's thoughts and feelings, depending upon the situation, assertive communicators kind of push through that discomfort and say, like, I think I need to say what I need to say, while still respecting what another person might have to say about the situation. So this is a very open form of communication. This is the most desired form of communication as well. It's usually the most effective one. So how do we do that? How do we be assertive in our communication? Usually we maintain some confident body language. So when we think about confident body language, we think about looking somebody in the face. And you can make direct eye contact, but don't make that glaring and uncomfortable, certainly. But maybe standing upright, looking up, not looking down. Not usually pointing your finger at somebody, but kind of being square, looking at them honestly. Here we use I statements. I talked a little bit about you statements with aggressive communication. I statements is saying something along the lines of, I feel, when, because, I need. So I statements are effective because I'm talking about myself. When I use a you statement, it sounds like I'm blaming somebody else. Here we can say, I feel stressed when this happens because I need this. That type of thing. So I statements are super effective in focusing in on your own feelings and not being threatening or blaming. When we start blaming other people in communication, it's not really effective because people tend to become more defensive. Learning to say no. I'm sure you've all heard the one-liner, no is a complete sentence. There are times when it's absolutely appropriate just to say no, and you don't need to give any further explanation. It totally depends on the situation and the person that you're talking to. There are times when I statements are more appropriate if you're looking to start a conversation. I statements aren't usually something that you just say the statement and then the conversation's over. I statements are a way to really start a conversation. If we're not looking to kind of have a conversation about something and we need to set a boundary, learning to say no is very important here. Voicing your needs and desires with confidence. So not kind of saying something and then backpedaling. An example of that would be, no, I don't want you to use my phone today, but well, I guess maybe you could, maybe a little bit later, yeah, and kind of backpedaling like that. We need to voice our needs and we need to be confident when we say these things. That way it sends a clear and concise message to the other person. It's not very wishy-washy and flipping back and forth. We want to make sure that if we're being assertive, that we're listening to understand what somebody else has to say and not to respond to what they're saying. So what that means is when we're listening to somebody else, we're not having in the back of our minds the thing that we're going to say next. We're really listening and kind of interpreting what they're trying to say, taking a pause, maybe a breath, and then answering. So we really want to understand what's happening and then respond. And we want to use other active listening skills. The way that people know that we're listening to them is that we look at them in the face. We're paying attention. Maybe we're nodding. Maybe we're engaging in a different way where we're laughing or agreeing, or sometimes if there's a pause saying, so what I'm hearing you say is that, so we're kind of reflecting back what people are saying. So they truly understand that we are listening and we are kind of hearing what's going on. Other interpersonal skills that are really important when we're talking about communication, setting healthy boundaries when necessary. So there are a number of different types of boundaries that people have. Some boundaries are a little bit more firm. Some boundaries are healthy boundaries. Some boundaries are a little too porous, like having too many holes in them. So we want to be sure that we're using the type of boundaries that are appropriate for the situation. And also having the understanding that sometimes boundaries change over time and that's okay. Sometimes when we first meet a person, we might not want to tell them everything that's going on in our personal lives because that would be oversharing and that wouldn't be appropriate for the situation. Maybe we have some boundaries around that, but maybe as we get to know a person, we start to feel more comfortable and our boundaries with them change. We want to make sure we have awareness of ourselves and of other people. So having awareness of myself when I'm using some interpersonal skills and kind of communicating with other people would be like having awareness of what my values are, what my goals are, what I'm hoping to achieve out of a conversation with somebody else. Maybe I just need to hang out with my friends and vent about a stressful day. Or maybe we're taking a class together and we're looking to really grow and enhance our communication. And then having awareness of what's kind of going on with other people. And that can be, like I said before, using some active listening skills. We want to make sure that we have clear communication skills. We want to make sure that we're speaking with confidence, that we're being clear with the message that we're sending. We're not backpedaling. We're not looking just to make everybody happy to have friends, but we're looking to express how we feel in the situation. We want to make sure we're open-minded to what other people have to say. A conversation can become very one-sided when I'm not open-minded to what somebody else thinks or has to say about a certain situation. Typically, when we're having a conversation, we want to exchange ideas and share them. So being open to what somebody else has to say can be really an important piece to that puzzle. We want to pay attention to those body language, those nonverbal cues. If somebody is not looking at us in the face, or maybe they're looking down or their arms are crossed, maybe they're not so open for communication at this point in time. And maybe I need to address that before I continue on. It's important to have respect and tolerance for other people. We are always going to run into people that we don't see eye to eye with. Maybe somebody that we don't agree with, maybe somebody we've had a history of maybe having some verbal altercation with. It's really important that we always have respect for somebody else and tolerate other people and their opinions. So sometimes having respect is maybe not saying anything at all in a conversation with a group of people, but maybe just kind of listening and stepping back, or being open and having respect to another person's perspective. We also need to remember to always have patience when we are dealing with other people. And that kind of fits along with having respect and tolerance, but being patient with other people. Maybe they are in a different place than we are. Maybe they're not understanding what we're saying and we need to explain it to them in a different way. So having a lot of patience when we're dealing with others. And last, and maybe one of the most important parts about interpersonal skills and communication is having confidence in ourselves. When we want to say something, when we want to have skills, when we want to interact with another person, when we have a mission that we need to accomplish, we need to have a confidence in ourselves. And I'm not saying that you're going to have complete self-confidence after watching this video, but slowly working on having more self-confidence and working on your communication skills is a great way to kind of start that process. So I'm really grateful that you took the time to watch this video on communication and interpersonal skills. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll pick another video to watch next. Thank you.